I would say the biggest unexpected lesson would be the need for upstream data visibility. It's great to have data within our organization and KPIs and things like that. And I always try to have our metrics be proactive instead of reactive. But I think that things like COVID and tariffs and things like that, what that really showed us is that having access to that upstream data before it even gets to your organization is where you can have an even bigger impact.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Kerrie Jordan. Welcome to our show where we hear from leaders who are driving the future of manufacturing and supply chain innovation. Today, I'm speaking with Jeremy Codiroli, Vice President of Global Supply Chain at AVI-SPL, which is a leading provider of audiovisual and unified communications solutions, or otherwise known as AVUC solutions. This organization is dedicated to enhancing collaboration and communication for organizations worldwide. It was established in 1979, headquartered in Tampa, Florida, and is now a global technology solutions leader that proudly ignites confidence and curiosity. AVI-SPL has grown to become the world's largest AV-UC integrator, serving a worldwide clientele that includes 80% of Fortune 100 companies. Now, I'm looking forward to this conversation because my guest, Jeremy, has over 15 years of experience in operations and supply chain management. He's well known for his data-driven skill set and was even recently honored with the Association of Supply Chain Management's Award of Excellence for his leadership in fostering innovation and promoting continuous education. This is a very prestigious award. Jeremy, welcome and thank you for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, first, let's go ahead and get to know you. Would you share your career journey and what brought you to AVI-SPL?
So it all kind of started all the way back in high school. I was invited to join a program working with NASA directly at Langley Air Force Base to kind of coincide with my schooling. And I was actually able to work with NASA on a manned mission to Mars and work on some of the planning associated with that. That was an experience that really just got me excited for engineering and data, analytics, processes, things like that. And really from there, that was when I realized that was kind of the path I wanted to go down. I wasn't totally sure it was supply chain yet, but I knew something around that path. So I went to Virginia Tech. I joined their industrial systems engineering program, which I'll give them a shout out, is top 5 in the country. Once I graduated, I joined Georgia Pacific and worked with warehousing. So that was my first beginning of exposure to a piece of supply chain. I then joined a company called ChemTreat, which is owned by Danaher. They handle hazardous chemicals in corporate applications. And I led all of their optimization initiatives within procurement. I was one of their procurement leaders. There were acquisitions internationally, which was my exposure to international supply chain, which I thought was a fantastic experience from the procurement side, just the differences between different regions of the world. I then joined an audiovisual company called Whitlock. I started off just actually doing process improvement, not specifically focused on supply chain. And then Whitlock was acquired by AVI-SPL. And then I focused on process improvement for a little bit of time. But it seemed like every process I was getting involved in kept ending up back at supply chain. So I just kept building around that. There was not a supply chain team at the company. Eventually, our executive team made the decision to create that supply chain team and allowed me to lead that group. So it started off with one person, which was myself. I hired Taylor House on my team as employee number 1. That was the beginning of a very rapid growth of our supply chain initiative globally in the organization. Our global supply chain team is actually now over 100 people just over the course of about a year and a half. So we've had significant growth, which has been a blast to be a part of. And we've had a significant impact, not just on AVI-SPL, but on the audiovisual industry as a whole.
That's great. So, Jeremy, so incredible story of growth. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm based in Richmond, Virginia, and most of my family went to Virginia Tech. So I love that you did that shout out. Excellent. Very cool. Well, so it sounds like you have a background in process improvement. How did that shape your approach to global supply chain management?
To me, when you start to study Lean Six Sigma and really pieces of engineering as well. It really changes the way that you think. I think that everybody benefits from getting some kind of continuous education around Lean Six Sigma. Green belt is great. Black belt, if you really want to dive in. Master black belt, which is the one that I have, if you really want to understand the analytics and the data around it. But that's really driven my kind of data over everything approach. And that's kind of how my whole team looks at things as well. So if somebody suggests that we make a change, specifically if it's, any kind of meaningful impact, the first question that everybody is ready to discuss is, what is the data impact that the initiative is going to have? And what was the data that went into that, so that everybody can understand from a numerical standpoint why we're making the decision that we are, which is not just beneficial internally within my team, but when we communicate those changes to the local offices or different departments that we want to partner with, it's significantly easier and honestly more fair to them to go into the conversation with, here's why we're doing this. Here's the problem that we're trying to solve, the data around it. And here's the solution that we have and the impact that we project. I always like to tell people, if that's the way that we frame any kind of change management, there's not much to argue about unless somebody thinks that the numbers aren't accurate, which I always welcome anyone challenging any numbers that I put out there. If they're wrong, then I want them to be corrected. But that's kind of what's driven the data approach. And then I would say secondary, more focused on the supply chain aspect, is that within process improvement, obviously this concept of Kaizen, which is just continuously improving, that is the core of everything around Lean Six Sigma process improvement. And so that is significantly beneficial within the supply chain industry, because supply chain as a whole is always changing. There are always new variables. There are always new obstacles, something that needs to be controlled. You think about tariffs, things like that, constantly changing. The environment is constantly changing. And so to have a mindset that you already want to be constantly changing for the better, it just fits in perfectly with supply chain.
Yeah. So you mentioned tariffs, the constantly changing nature of supply chain. It can often be chaotic. How do you build resilience into your supply chain in order to approach this? How do you see supply chain, and also perhaps like the challenges associated with this, as it is always changing? And I imagine there are new challenges that come up day to day, and maybe even new nuances to the existing challenges. How do you approach that?
Great question. I actually, anytime I do an interview for anyone on my team, I'm usually very involved in our hiring process. I tell everybody I want to hire on my team that you need to love chaos. I always tell people, I'm not interested in hiring someone that wants to just join the team and watch things happen and press some buttons and have that be the end of it. I want people that thrive and are excited in a chaotic environment, because those are the people that really succeed within supply chain. And I think the goal around supply chain, as it relates to things like, chaotic situations, is never to eliminate the chaos. I think that's a misconception that, especially after COVID, people have started to want to focus on, is eliminating the chaos within their organization as it relates to supply chain. I think the most successful supply chains that I've been a part of were the ones that they almost embrace the chaos and lean into it to understand what's going on in the changes within the global environment, to understand what things are occurring, and then saying, how do we not only just account for that, but how do we ride the momentum of that to turn some of this into a positive? A lot of times people miss the fact that when you have some kind of chaos within a global supply chain environment, that's probably affecting all of your competitors as well. So it's not just an issue that's only affecting you, it's something that's affecting your entire industry. And so sometimes I almost think of the metaphor about a few people that are running away from a bear in the forest. It's not necessarily that you have to escape the bear, you have to run faster than the bear. You just have to run faster than everybody else. And so I think that almost applies for some situations within the supply chain chaos. If everybody's getting hit with something and we're the ones that control it and embrace it and account for it the best way possible, then we're the ones that are going to come out serving our customers better than anybody else can.
And I love that you said, well, that you ask your incoming employees or candidates, you need to love chaos. I just love I wrote it down. I'm gonna add that. I've got so many sticky notes on my monitor. I'm gonna add that to one. Another one that actually you had mentioned I've got written right here, get the data, rely on the data. You have to be making data-driven decisions all the time in order, to really stay ahead of all this. So I wanted to ask you, so AVI-SPL is in the audio visual industry. What are some of the biggest supply chain challenges that are unique to your industry?
I'd say the biggest one is just the fact that the supply chain maturity across the entire AV industry it's just not mature. It's generally a new practice. You can see when supply chain hiring started. Globally in any industry, there's been a massive uptick in hiring around supply chain post COVID. You see a massive uptick in chief supply chain officers within organizations. That used to be a very rare title. It's not as rare as it once was. But specific to the audiovisual integration industry, that is just something that has not been a focus across any part of the industry in any region of the world, really. So I think I mentioned our organization never had a supply chain practice. It was really just, each individual office trying to make their own decisions and wear the supply chain hat along with their other hats, which some of them do a great job. But if you don't have an actual person that's been trained in supply chain, centralized to really drive an organization on the same path, it's just going to be extremely difficult to really get to a spot where you feel good about your supply chain. So, in addition to that immaturity, as we do installs for customers, those install schedules are constantly changing. So, we might think that we want to be on site on the 29th, but we're usually the last ones in the building on a job doing the audio visual work. So, we can't go in and put up displays and speakers and racks and everything, and then expect someone to go in after us and sand the drywall and do the painting and things like that. So we're always the last ones in. So when the schedule gets compressed, we're the ones that don't get to push our schedule out any further. So that's a very unique challenge and speaks to the needs for an agile, resilient supply chain, because you've got to be able to say the day before, hey, I was expecting to do this install tomorrow. I've now got to pivot and I've got a whole nother plan that I've got to do. I would say the third part is around the fact that we deal with technology, generally expensive technology. And so there is a risk of obsolescence with our inventory. So we're not able to just order a significant amount of equipment and have it sit there because it will become obsolete very quickly. It's also expensive. So from a capital standpoint, we're not able to just store a lot of that and just rely on huge stocking levels in order to build our resilience. But we have to rely on really strategic best practices in order to achieve that resilience while not having stocking levels that are way too high.
Yeah, those are some unique challenges, obsolescence, the timing, the scheduling. Now, being a global organization, how does this complexity apply to managing supply chains in different regions? I imagine there has to be some kind of balance, between global standardization and that local regional fit or customization. How do you manage that?
I think once again, you have to be somebody that enjoys the whiplash you can get from dealing with different regions. We are obviously a U.S. based company. Most of our business is in the U.S., but one of the reasons that we serve our customers better than everybody else is because we are such a global minded company. You think about some of these large customers, they're people that they don't just have offices in the U.S. They've got offices all around the world, and they expect us to be a service provider that can say, yeah, no problem. Wherever you want to do this install anywhere in the world, we've got you covered. And we're going to do it as close as we can to the same way as possible, no matter where it's going to occur. So obviously there's that level of consistency that we want. And when we look at where AVI-SPL specifically has a role in the global marketplace, again, I focus on the US. We have a heavy presence in Canada. We have a very rapidly growing presence in the EMEA market. APAC as well is a very recently growing part of our business. And then we actually just acquired a large integration company in South America called ICAP. And they're a great operation, very, very great company. They're going to fit in extremely well with the AVI-SPL culture. But as we deal with that integration of how they do supply chain, it's very different than how we expect to grow our supply chain business in Europe or in Asia or any other part of the world. And so I would say that the biggest challenge is around, first, just the capability standpoint. The capabilities that exist in Europe are very different than the capabilities that exist in India, and things that might be overkill from a logistics standpoint in a place like Germany is not going to be overkill in a place like India. So being able to match that level of complexity for what's needed within a certain area of a certain market is pretty difficult to have to understand which is which. And then again, as somebody that, I have to understand all of these different parts of the world, you have to be able to have a conversation with somebody in Europe and be in that mindset of what the challenges are from a European supply chain standpoint. And then have the ability to hang up the call and call somebody in Argentina and immediately be able to switch your brain to the challenges and opportunities that exist from a supply chain standpoint in a place like Argentina. So I think it's a blast. I love it. It keeps it fresh every single day. But again, it kind of goes back to that. You want to succeed in supply chain, you have to be someone that loves that chaos of constantly adjusting and needing to be forced to make adjustments in order to succeed. I would say another kind of a final challenge that exists within the global supply chain market is system differences. So that's something that we deal with, and we're moving towards a more unified solution as it relates to ERP, WMS, TMS. But in general, most companies, when they've got a international entity, it's on a different system, whether that's because of an acquisition or because one market developed a certain solution that they wanted to start, and then another market did not implement it. That can cause a massive disconnect within supply chain data. And so that's kind of the final kind of major challenge that I would see.
Hmm. Okay. And so I'd love to explore how technology helps you manage all this complexity and chaos, because on the show, we typically do dive deep into the role that, technology plays in supply chain and manufacturing. And I imagine with so much chaos, with so much organizational growth around the globe, and even within supply chain, you said that there are over 100 people now. How do you leverage technology, and how do you leverage it within the supply chain, maybe to enhance visibility, to manage the global nature of your business, the just on time scheduling? How does technology play a role?
I thought I would bring up the words AI. I guess the word AI a little bit earlier in this conversation. I'm surprised it's taken us so long to get there.
Yes.
A lot of good things to talk about, but AI obviously is the usual answer that goes out there, and there's a good reason for it. So as an organization, we have really started to lean in on how do we utilize AI within our business. And so we actually have an artificial intelligence center of excellence within AVI-SPL. That's how serious we take it. So it's led by our head of IT, Bill Romalo, who's done a great job kind of bringing us in the same direction as it relates to AI, so that it doesn't become this scattered array of solutions. And then it's also, we've got someone named Julian Phillips in our organization that's known as a very visionary leader within the audiovisual industry. And so those two together bring a very unique leadership standpoint to AI to the organization. And so specifically, some of the things that we're doing within supply chain, one thing that we haven't made very public yet because we've been doing a lot of work on it recently, it's something that my team is working on by somebody in our optimization team. His name's Michael Zobe. He's actually working on what we're kind of calling it, and the name might change, but we're having some fun with it. They call it the Hermes tool as a nod to the Greek god of transportation. So having a little bit of fun with that. It has an acronym, so not ready to release that yet. But that tool is essentially going to be a leaning on machine learning and large language models and things like that, all of the core of artificial intelligence, to actually build an AI chatbot that our organization can use as it relates to international trade and things like Incoterms and what's the appropriate Incoterm for a certain situation and what's the level of risk that we're able to take on, and just to really kind of dive into the complexity around this. And, I've looked to see if anyone else is doing this. I don't know if anyone else in the industry has it because of the difficulty associated with it. I don't know how long it's going to take anyone else to catch up to us, but it is a learning model that we have actually built, keeping in mind all of the data security and data constraints and things like that, which is a big part of AI. We've been feeding it best practices and articles and any kind of data and information related to international trade and Incoterms for which direction you'd want to go in a certain situation. But then our secret is we are also, and I don't mind revealing it because it is not easy to do, is to actually feed this model with AVI-SPL specific strengths and weaknesses so that we can actually use that chatbot to ask it questions specific to each situation that we're doing. And maybe it's a large international purchase or international sale even. And it's actually got built into it, into the model where AVI-SPL succeeds and where we might not feel as strong and we might want to rely on a vendor to do something and take over a certain amount of risk or responsibility. So that is going to be a huge win for us as an organization. And I think it speaks to the ability of AI to enhance people's jobs and their impact versus replacing them. This tool is not replacing anybody on the team. We still have import-export specialists. We still have people that specialize in international trade. They are going to use this as a tool to just do their job even more effectively. On a higher level, we're working towards a new ERP system where we build in artificial intelligence capability for logistics planning and forecasting to look at on an inbound and outbound basis, what do we forecast we're going to need to move either from the vendors to our warehouses or from the warehouses to the customer job site? And what does that giant spaghetti map look like overall? How do you digitize that into a formulaic methodology so that you can just use AI to say, you should be picking up from here, consolidating here, delivering here, and then going over here, and just building that entire model. And again, enhancing our existing team's ability to have an impact. And then the final piece is around demand planning, where we want to really lean into these partnerships that we have with our vendors. AVI-SPL has extremely close relationship with our partners. We want to start doing more data sharing with them where we share demand on our side, and then we partner with the procurement and supply team to actually come up with a overall solution that's collaborative with our vendors to say, here's where we see an uptick in demand, here's where we can potentially have an uptick in supply, and we work with our vendor on those decisions using AI because of the vast amount of data associated with it.
This is incredible. It does sound like your organization is further ahead than almost all. So that's remarkable. I have so many questions about this. First of all, what do you expect? What do you anticipate these types of innovations to do for your business? I mean, I'm imagining, of course, higher productivity. I imagine your teams are going to be able to make better decisions faster. Probably also quite a few things around protecting compliance for your business and risk mitigation. As you are, putting this together and working with your team, and your center of excellence is determining, okay, where are we going to make our next investments? What does your framework look like for business outcome and the business value that you anticipate?
I can't necessarily reveal the exact dollar amount that we're projecting.
Of course.
From a standpoint, which I'm sure is not a surprise to you. But I will say that, I mean, we're looking at millions of dollars of impact there. And as an organization, you can either take that and just enhance your margin and just kind of move on. The decision that we've made as a supply chain organization, we try to be extremely customer focused and really build ourselves as a customer-centric supply chain organization. And one of the things that we're doing around that is, if we're going to save a lot of money and we want to partner with our customers on that, we want to pass those savings on to them. So generally, when we build all of the margin enhancing opportunities, one of the biggest things we do is we pass most of that down to them. As we, give them proposals, we go to them and say, hey, by the way, we have a new way of doing this. We're actually able to reduce your costs as well. And so we want to let them know that we are working on their behalf to be as close of a partner as we can and build that strategic relationship with them, instead of just having this transactional relationship where, we just try to make a sale and move on to the next one. So that's one of the opportunities that we have, just not even just with AI, but just in terms of all of the strategic investments that we've made in supply chain. Whenever I present to our exec team, I always give them an update financially on the benefits that we put out there. But I always let them know that one of the things that I'm most excited about is that it's fun to save a couple $1 million and be able to present on that. But to me, what's even better is to say, here's how we're serving our customers better. And sure, there's a bunch of different ways you can build the financial impact of that. But overall, to be able to say, we are delivering to our customers in a way that they are noticing a drastic difference, and then we're keeping schedules on time, and we're keeping our quality higher, all at the same time, so that our customers are happier to work with us. To me, that's where the biggest impact occurs, and that's much bigger than just shaving off some costs here and there.
hmm That makes a lot of sense. I love that you have sort of pivoted the thinking from a business outcome perspective, not just within your organization, but as you said, a customer centric approach. How is this going to affect our ability to best serve our customers and really up level visibility into our customers across the organization? This is great. Can I ask you about sustainability? I mean, many organizations, especially those that are global and international companies, are focused on sustainability from a supply chain strategy perspective. What role does these kinds of efforts or initiatives play in yours?
We actually, not just within supply chain, but AVI-SPL as a whole, within the last year or two, has really started to lean in on the sustainability aspect of our business. We actually just recently promoted someone in our organization, Kelly Baldwin, as our very first SVP of sustainability and ESG. So she's been leading kind of overall what our ESG impact is. And again, listening to our customers to say, how can we support you from an ESG standpoint? And then just from an operational and supply chain standpoint, specifically, what we're doing is really embracing this concept of sustainability through operational efficiency. And there's a few initiatives associated with that. One of the biggest ones is just doing things better from a supply chain standpoint. So getting away from sending 9 trucks in the same direction and instead utilizing consolidation where we might do a few shorter shipments to one location, consolidate onto one truck, and then send that to kind of a longer haul drive or something like that so that we can reduce our carbon impact from that point of view. The other side is around our fleet. So we have a very large fleet. It's around 500 to 600 vehicles that we use as just in the US. We actually just recently started tracking the movements of those vehicles, not to track people or anything associated with that, but just so that we could look at where we were driving and where we were passing each other, and actually looking at how our own fleet is impacting our internal supply chain and how we're using outsourced carriers so that we could start to see the entire map and the entire picture to say, how can we as a whole, as a supply chain network, start to do things where we're doing less driving, we're doing less mileage back and forth. And actually in 2024, we reduced our fuel usage by around 10%. So pretty dramatic across that level of fleet vehicles. And that is around that operational efficiency, which fantastic from a sustainability standpoint. It's also great from a financial standpoint as well.
It's very clear AVI-SPL takes sustainability very seriously. And on behalf of all of us, thank you. I mean, that is some impressive results that you have delivered. Just incredible. And it sounds like there's a lot more to come, which is amazing. And congratulations, too, on all of the AI and automation and additional technologies that you've been bringing into your business and what an impact it's making. As far as AI goes, there's so much discussion now about, well, is it delivering results? And as you've been saying, you do expect very impressive results. And if I could ask you along these lines, metrics, what sort of metrics do you use to measure the success of your supply chain as a whole, but also these new initiatives as you're bringing on new technologies?
Just some of the standard supply chain metrics. I don't know if it's as fun of an answer, but on time and full is a big one for us. Again, customer satisfaction, we consider a supply chain metric where most organizations don't. And then we just have, in general, just a wide variety of cost metrics that maybe will tie to the same numerator, but the denominator varies. And the reason that I really like that approach is because if we say that we want to track our supply chain costs as a percentage of revenue, we could also track it as a percent of equipment purchased or equipment delivered or different aspects of that, or by real estate footprint. One might go up where the others stay the same. And I don't want to miss it because I was only looking at one that stayed the same. But if one goes up, I want to know why and make sure that we're proactively able to get ahead of that before the other metrics start to go in the wrong direction. I do want to come back to actually something that you said around technology and the debate around the impact of AI. And I could probably make this comment for organizations as a whole, but I'll make it for supply chains because I do think that it goes even just beyond AI. I think that I see a lot of supply chains and organizations with supply chain, they lean on technology as a crutch for having a good supply chain. And that is all that it ever gets to be. Now, technology is, I think, the base in order to have a good supply chain. I think everybody needs a good ERP system, a good WMS, a good TMS. So that's not saying that that's not important. But I think that a lot of people, they think that if they just put in a WMS, it'll solve the problem. Technology will never be a replacement for having, in my mind, a customer focused strategy around supply chain that's focused on continuous improvements and best practices around supply chain. Technology will never replace those. So I think some people, they want to say that they do AI just because it's fun to say. One thing that I studied in the financial markets was the increase in the terminology usage of artificial intelligence within stockholder reports. And you could see the impact on a stock based on when they were doing their quarterly reporting, how many times they said artificial intelligence. And so that's something that we never want to be, is just to say, hey, we did AI, pat ourselves on the back, and then there's no impact from it. So I think a lot of organizations miss that.
Yep. Well said. I definitely agree. It's about showing results and having a pragmatic approach. And why would you incorporate AI for the sake of incorporating AI? It's really about, we have this new advanced technology that we can now solve problems that have yet to be solved because we just haven't yet had the technology. So what are those big problems that we can address now that we have this at our fingertips? So I love it. Okay, I would love to get to your leadership style as the Vice President of Global Supply Chain. When we look at the industry as a whole, audiovisual, unified communications technology, this has been growing rapidly, very rapidly. How do you support that growth in your business with your team while at the same time sort of establish these long-lasting initiatives?
I think that, and by the way, it's a huge boom in the industry. Historically, we foresee that just continuing into the future as well. So it's a very exciting time to be in this industry. I would say the biggest thing is, I know I've said it a few times on this, is listening to our customers and just seeing, hey, there's a lot of new things that are coming down the pipeline from a technology standpoint, and how customers and organizations in general are utilizing their technology from an audiovisual standpoint. But just listening to them to understand what they think is important so that we can meet those needs as well. There's no point in me thinking that we've got this amazing supply chain if our customers don't think the same thing. There's absolutely no point in that. We don't gain anything, and we will fade away as an organization. So a good example of this is actually the boom specifically, I'll say, in the federal government. The U.S. federal government is actually leaning in pretty heavily on unified communications and audio visual integration and things like that. And that was something that, again, from a maturity standpoint of supply chain, we were not very mature in, but our head of our federal practice, his name's Mike Garvey, he and I started really diving into this to say, it's great that we're improving our supply chain as a whole, but what do we need to do around this growing part of our federal business? And so, again, just kind of this startup mindset that we kept the whole time within our supply chain, we started to look at what are some new ideas that nobody's looked at doing. And so we are actually able to offer now to some of our federal customers, not just in the US, but internationally, secure supply chain opportunities. So for example, the US federal government, if they're shipping something to a military base over in Europe, they want to make sure that that product is secure from start to finish. That's an example of something where that problem has maybe held back that aspect of the AV industry from growing more than it has, where when we started listening to our customers and saying, how can we support the growth of the AV industry within your specific realm, specifically the U.S. federal government, they said, we need secure supply chain capabilities. So Mike Garvey and I worked together on that, of what does that solution look like? And now that's something that we offer to customers that I'm pretty sure nobody else in the industry can offer. So once again, it comes back to listening to customers and hearing them, so that, yes, growth in the industry is fantastic, but knowing where there could be other growth that's being held back by some sort of supply chain roadblock, listening to our customers and partnering with them on those solutions is where we're just going to continue to grow in markets that maybe didn't have the level of growth as the rest of the industry.
That sounds like a great lesson learned. And I imagine as you work more and more closely with customers, you learn more. But if I could ask you, were there any unexpected lessons that you've learned, especially given all of the supply chain disruptions that have happened in the recent years?
Yeah. No, I would say the biggest unexpected lesson would be the need for upstream data visibility. And so it's great to have data. within our organization and KPIs and things like that. And I always try to have our metrics be proactive instead of reactive. But I think that things like COVID and tariffs and things like that, what that really showed us is that having access to that upstream data before it even gets to your organization is where you can have an even bigger impact. And one thing that we actually did as an organization is, this is a recent development for us. We actually partnered with the Department of Transportation on their FLOW program. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It stands for the Freight Logistics Optimization Works program. We met with the Department of Transportation. We wanted to become a member of that, which grants you exclusive upstream data access for supply chain information. So you can see where there's potential roadblocks, potential disruptions, how to adjust, how to have a countermeasure. And we partnered with them to kind of meet all the requirements that were necessary on our side. And we are actually the first, and as of right now, the only audiovisual integration company to be one of the 83 members on that list. So, again, unexpected, but again, embracing that chaos and saying, how do we lean into this and make this chaos a competitive advantage for us? Because now with us being part of that program and having upstream visibility, when our competitors learn that they've had a supply chain disruption and they start to panic, we've already implemented countermeasures 30 days in advance. So just an example of kind of leaning on that lesson and actually acting on it and embracing that chaos.
That's great. You've had to get innovative, that's for sure, in order to deal with this. Well, if I can ask you, so I understand that continuous education is something that's very important to you. How do you foster that kind of culture within the organization?
One thing that I always tell my team is, and I do this, I started doing this when I would lead and facilitate Kaizen events, which are process improvement events. I started doing it in those, and then it just became kind of a part of my leadership style and the culture that I want to build is the concept of no dumb ideas, right? So I don't want anyone to feel like, well, this idea is too crazy for me to even want to say it, right? So I encourage people to just throw an idea out there, and nobody's going to get judged for having a crazy idea. I love crazy ideas, and maybe we look at the data behind it, and if it doesn't make sense and we don't want to pursue it, then we just don't pursue it, and that's the end of it. And nobody's in trouble for having an idea that didn't work out. But what I see a lot of times, what happens is somebody will say an idea that even in their minds they think this is a crazy idea, but this is the culture within our supply chain, so I'm going to say it anyways. Sometimes that might not be the idea that we end up implementing, but it usually will spark an idea with somebody else that says, hey, I don't know if that's going to work. We'll wait for the data. But that just made me think of what if we did this? And again, just kind of always saying, what if, and really embracing, I think I mentioned before, like this startup culture. Yes, we're the world's largest audiovisual integration company, but I want my team to feel like it's a startup where we always are thinking of new ideas. We rapidly want to change. One thing I always tell my team again is the concept of fail fast, learn fast. So let's not spend a bunch of time trying to figure out if an idea is going to work or not. Let's just try it out in a certain environment that's controlled. And if it doesn't work, then we learn from it and let's move on. But really leaning into that, and then kind of the baseline of everything I just said is the focus on data. So data as part of everything. So I don't want to hear anybody start trying to solve a problem until the problem has actually been defined. That is something that's very, very important for us when we have our meetings as a supply chain organization. Is if someone says, what if we did this? I expect the next question to be, what's the problem that you're trying to solve with that? And by the way, I want to hear numbers in that problem statement, not just this takes too long. I want to know by whose standards does it take too long? How long does it take right now? What is the standard that we should be doing? By the way, based on our customers' expectations, not on what I think our expectations should be. So that data as a baseline to that continuous improvement is the only way it's going to succeed.
I think that's really interesting that you've had this culture built where you're able to say whatever you are thinking, those crazy ideas. As you said, nothing's too crazy. Let's get it out there. But also this very strong foundation in data clarifying the problem. And I imagine when these two come together, it's a very powerful workspace where you can really get innovative and, come up with these groundbreaking ideas that's going to take the organization to the next level. I think that's great advice. What final thoughts? What other advice do you have? And anything else that I didn't ask you about that you wanted to share?
No, I mean, I guess I would say the only final piece of advice that I would say is really just that emphasis on data and really using data in a proactive way versus just keeping score, right? I never have any kind of interest in saying, hey, how did we do? I mean, obviously, I want to know, hey, how did we do last week? But I also want to know, how are we looking like we're going to do next week? And if it's looking like I'm not happy with that answer, let's act on it now before we just say, oh man, something occurred that I wish we had knew was coming, and that's too bad. We'll try better next time. So having those proactive metrics, which is something that we're really leaning in on with a certain concept that we're implementing within the U.S.
Absolutely. Well, this is incredible. And okay, such a great conversation. I thank you so much. For those who want to learn more about you or about AVI-SPL, where would you direct them?
Yeah, for about AVI-SPL, I would just check out our AVI-SPL homepage. We've got a lot of great solutions. I'm very proud to work there. Like I said, we are the largest AV integration company in the world, which it makes it pretty fun because it gives us a lot more to work with from a supply chain standpoint. But I'd encourage you to go to the homepage, check it out. We've got a lot of great resources on our website. There's tons of contacts to reach out to if somebody has any questions about us. I would say for myself, probably just check out my LinkedIn. I do a lot of posts there. I'm very excited, very passionate about supply chain, and just kind of the hashtag I always use is hashtag elite supply chain because I want that to be how my team sees themselves. Luckily, it doesn't take a lot of imagination. So I always remind them we do have an elite supply chain, and I'm very happy to put it out there publicly and talk about it on LinkedIn. So just check me out on LinkedIn. I'm very transparent about a lot of the big initiatives we have going on because I am very proud of them, and I'm very excited to show them off to our customers.
Wonderful. Thank you. We'll include those links. It sounds like there's so much more to come, but already some incredible achievements. So this has been wonderful. Jeremy, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. That was Jeremy Codiroli, Vice President of Global Supply Chain at AVI-SPL. And to everyone listening, thank you for being a part of the future of manufacturing.